In Germany, I would just not cold email. Unfortunately, that sucks. You live in Europe. It's not great for marketing. It doesn't seem to be as great like for business. Like I love Europe. I'm moving to Europe like next year, but I would just not touch cold email if I was in Germany.
So we have with us for this Q&A, Amar, which maybe you guys know him from Twitter or his blog, but Amar has built a SaaS company to help maid services run their business. He scaled it up to $2 million in ARR. He's a really helpful guy on the internet. A lot of people really like talking to him. And he's been kind enough to come on to Indie Worldwide to give us a exclusive opportunity here to ask him questions. If you really like this session, if you want more out of him, definitely hit up Mash about Sparrow Startups and see if you can't get into one-on-one mentoring with Amar. But with that, I hand the mic to you, sir. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. So my story is really, I read like the 4 Hour Work Week back in 2007, 2006, whenever it first came out. I think a lot of people have probably read that book. Like by this point, it's probably planted the seed in pretty much everyone's heads of just like, how cool would it be to go and to be a digital nomad, to work remotely, to have that sort of like freedom. Maybe that's not for everyone, right? Maybe, you're watching this and you just want to make some money. You want to like have all the time in the world and to just be able to hang out with your kids at home. That's totally cool. But I was very much focused on like that freedom. I just wanted like the ability to do like anything that I wanted to. And so, yeah, like I said, like that really just like planted that seed for me back in the day. And so from there, I spent 8, 9 years essentially trying little side projects, little side hustles, all that stuff. And I started working in 2013. So it would have been in April of 2013 is when my friend Arun and I started working on zenmaid together. So for those of you that don't follow me on Twitter, I'm a non-technical founder. That I'm the guy who like essentially like I realized at the very beginning that my technical co-founder was like the talent of the business, right? That first 2 years he was probably 80 or 90% of the business, and so I literally did like everything else, right? It was like, if he was in the middle of a code sprint and wanted Chipotle, I would go and get him like Chipotle. Right now, granted, for me, like I'm very like ADD, I'm very interrupt driven. So for me, that's not a big deal. I drive over to Chipotle, I'm just thinking about stuff, maybe making a sales call on the way or whatever. But I really like hustled like at the beginning to kind of like make that like happen, right? And so like since then, it's like very much evened out that he actually left the company in 2017 and still gets paid like to this day, like every month he just gets like a check. It's a little bit smaller than it used to be, but he still gets a check every month. Like we've got a great relationship, and he's like groomsman at my wedding and everything. But that was like quite cool in the beginning. So that was 2013, right? So 2013, if you guys again, if you check like my Twitter, if you check the top thread, I talk a little bit about both how much revenue we made and my actual take home pay during like this time. And so we started in 2013. We made just under $1,000 like in total during 2013 in like the 9 months. And we only actually launched the software in October, I think, of 2013. So we spent the 6 or 7 months before that building out some emails, doing like all of that stuff. The first 3 years in business for zenmaid, it was just the two of us. It was me and my friend Arun building the business. So during that time, there were a couple of marketing channels. I know that a lot of folks here are focused on growth and getting that initial growth, that initial traction and stuff. So what we did at the beginning is we used cold email, as you guys have seen in the headline for this event, that cold email was the primary driver of like our first like 100 customers or so. But mixed in with that was also one lucky partnership that actually came from our cold email process, right? It wasn't actually a cold email. It was actually like a LinkedIn outreach that was like kind of part of like the same outreach campaign that we were doing that turned into a partnership with an industry influencer. And then the other thing that I'd forgotten until like maybe 5 minutes before the call or something is that we actually ran paid ads for zenmaid since day one, but at a very, very small amount. So literally because we wanted to have just a very consistent amount of traffic, that I'm always about consistency. I don't really care about speed as long as we're consistent. And that's always been kind of my approach is, is we started out spending just $5 a day or whatever the minimum ads were. I think it's $5 a day on Facebook, and maybe you can get away with less than that, like on Google. But we used paid ads to just make sure that it's like, okay, if we make some change to the website, like it's not a true A/B test, but we can see if it's just all of a sudden zeroed out our leads or whatever. And so we just wanted that like sort of consistency of like, we can count on 3 people a day giving us their emails, right? That's something to work with. That's something to like to grow or whatever. So that's how we got our first 100 customers. And the first 100 customers, I think, took us about those 3 years, right? Like it took us, yeah, 3 years to get to $10,000 a month. At 2.5 years, I remember we were at $8,000 a month, because that's when I quit my full-time job and started traveling. That out of $8,000 a month, for reference, guys, I was paying myself $1,000 a month, and moved out of San Francisco, flew to Thailand and cut my expenses and started doing like the digital nomad thing. So that was kind of how I bought my freedom, yeah, like back in the day, right? And that's just something that, young, dumb, no responsibilities, right? Like I had $10,000 in credit card debt, but I was just looking at it and I was like, yes, I make a bunch of money in San Francisco, but I'm also not getting ahead, right? And it's like, thanks, mom, for telling me I can live with you, or I could save money by like not going out and drinking, but I could also kill myself to save money, right? Like I'm going to keep going out and drinking. So once I realized that I wasn't saving money in San Francisco anyways, then it was like, okay, like if I'm not going to be like actually getting ahead here, I might as well go and work on this full time and really take the shot. Interesting, like just side note there is that I actually felt that was the very, very low risk thing to do. To me, the high risk thing to do on a personal level was staying at the 9 to 5 job, because I knew where that path was going to take me, like down the line, right? That like I wasn't concerned about it not working. I was concerned about not taking the shot, right? And continuing to not take the shot, or sorry, not continuing to take shots, right? Okay, where was I? So that's how we started, or that's how we got everything kind of going back in the beginning. First 3 years is a bit of I don't know, a lot happened, but it's not a lot to talk about. Like you guys will find that as you're a couple of years into the business, first 3 years, you're like, oh my god, so much has happened. You get to like year 5, and you're like, yeah, the first 3 years don't matter. Like that's just like a blip. Like let's not talk about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Another thing. Sorry. Another just really quick thing, because Mash mentioned this to me on our call before this, is so like, I don't want anyone here thinking that like, I don't know, like I'm smarter than you guys, or like worked harder than you guys, or anything like that. Like all that it is really that I've taken enough shots to find something like that worked. And that took a while and may take you a while. But once I found that thing, I just doubled down on it and just stuck with it. Right? That once we had the product market fit, like I feel that almost everyone that I look up to in SaaS, it's not the people that jump out to like a couple $1,000,000 in 2 years. It's the guys that have been doing it for 13 years. And I'm just like, oh, cool. Like if I do this for another 4 years, I could reasonably be at $3 million a year in revenue as well. So just a little thing like there is like, yeah, there's nothing magic about anything that I've done. Like I had no experience with anything other than sales before we started this company. So 2015 is when we launched the zenmaid mastermind. So that's when we built a community for our actual niche, and that was one of the first sort of marketing things that we did that put us on the map. So my goal with a lot of zenmaid's marketing, a lot of our stuff is like direct response, like you paid ads, cold email, all of that stuff. But we also do a lot of stuff where it's more like almost like this, where it's not necessarily sort of like your traditional marketing, but my goal is to essentially create things that will get folks talking about zenmaid, or about something that zenmaid has done, without necessarily feeling like they're endorsing zenmaid. Right? So the zenmaid mastermind was a really great one, because it was the first big community on Facebook. It's like, oh, you're a maid service owner. Oh, you're struggling with hiring. Have you asked that on the zenmaid mastermind? People don't feel like they're endorsing the zenmaid software. They're just recommending a free community for people to go and ask questions, right? And so that was a really big one. And so that was the one that really put us on the map, because the next industry conference that I went to is like 500 maid service owners or whatever that are there. And that was the first year that walking through the hallways, I began to hear zenmaid like being talked about in conversations. And that year, it was mostly around the zenmaid community. It wasn't around our software, but a lot of people don't seem to realize like the value in that, right? Of like, it's pretty amazing if you can get people talking about your company, even if it's not your exact service. You can get to pitching them on the exact service, right? Get them talking about your company any way that you can, except by murdering somebody. If you murder somebody and they're talking about you because you like, went to jail as the CEO, that's not gonna fly. So that was like the first like big thing that we like did there. Then from okay, so then 2016 is when we began to really turn into like a real sort of company. I think that we began hiring. I think we made our first hire maybe in 2015 or in 2016. But 2017 is where it really began to like to come together. That by the end of 2017, I think we had maybe like 6 people on the team, or something like along those lines. At let's see, in 2017 though, at the end of the year, when we were actually at that conference that I'd mentioned before, that's when we had like possibly like the worst kind of time like for zenmaid, right? Like it's something that I hope no one on this call like goes through, but it was kind of like the gauntlet, right? It was kind of like the thing that like I genuinely believe that if there were like 10,000 parallel universes and other entrepreneurs like me had the exact like chance, to run this business or whatever, I think that 90 to 95% of people would have dropped out during this fiasco. So essentially what happened was we spent over a year working on a redesign, launched the redesign on Monday at midnight, and our software is like the backbone of our clients' businesses. We critically crashed the software from Monday until Thursday night, right? In the middle of the week. So not like a couple hour outage, like we're talking 3 or 4 days that our customers couldn't access their schedules to get to the work that they needed to do and to get paid and stuff. It was pretty fucking horrific. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this, but I guess I already did.
Fine
Let me
with
know if I
me.
shouldn't do that again. Okay. That was insanely rough. And for reference there, we lost 40% of our recurring revenue. So we were at about $18,000 a month and dropped down to, so out of the $18,000 like dollars a month that was coming in at the time from that customer like cohort or whatever, it came down to like maybe like 10,000 or 11,000 or something at some point, that we just obliterated our trust in the industry. The big key thing there was that the new redesign, the release was terrible, but the redesign itself was much better. And so what we very quickly saw was within a couple of months, we had more customers that had signed up since we'd launched the redesign than we had from customers from before that point. So it was very quickly like a, water under the bridge, like history, like kind of thing. But you still have people in our industry that'll still mention like that day. So yeah, that was fun. All right, actually moving on. 2018, next big marketing idea. Is the Maid Summit. You guys can check out maidsummit.com if you want to see that. That's your pretty standard like virtual conference. I think we've all seen it because we're all in SaaS. It's almost similar to something that you're watching like this. But I work with maid service owners who tend to be 10, 15, 20 years behind, like not necessarily behind like the times, because that's not really fair to them, but like behind internet marketers essentially, right? So it's like I look at internet marketing trends, like I look at what Russell Brunson is doing right now, and I can safely assume that like we're going to be doing that in like 3 years and it's going to work, right? But if I did it now, our industry like wouldn't be ready. So the Maid Summit was massive. We got 50 plus industry influencers to do like talks for this thing that all happened in 1 week. So for like a 1 to 2 week period, everyone was just talking about the Maid Summit. A lot of people didn't realize that we were the ones behind it. And then of course, like every person that visited that website, we would retarget on Facebook and go through and like eventually like close his business. So that was pretty massive. Yeah, and then I don't think there's really honestly too much more to really like talk about. The last like 2 to 3 years with COVID and stuff, it's really just been like more of the same. I mean, at some point it's really just doing the work, right? At some point, right now, like a lot of the stuff that we do, it's almost more dictated for us. It's not as much like innovation and stuff. There's just so many things going on at like there's just so much going on within the organization, right? That as the organization, gets bigger and bigger, it's a lot of boring stuff.
Did you miss anything, Mash?
No, no. I just wanted to ask him about the Maid Summit because what happens with a lot of these events, right? Especially in the SaaS space, I see that there's a lot of events that happen every year, and then slowly over time, more and more people learn about these events. There's hype, and then it slowly starts feeding itself. You learn about the event, more speakers come and join them, and then as more speakers come, it attracts more attendees, right? So what I'm curious about, Amar, is
Yeah.
in the beginning, right? Like how did you solve the cold start problem when it comes to building a community and the zenmaid summit, because it's a big deal to get to the point. And I was on your website, people are literally saying, hey Amar, thanks for putting this together. And I saw your speaker list, it's like 20 people. How did you like solve the cold start problem when you were initially starting that? How did you get people interested?
Yeah, sounds good. So okay. Yeah, good question. So I essentially I'm very extroverted, right? I've done like a lot of sales in the past, and I've realized that in terms of like relationship building, like it's always better to have the relationship with someone before like you need the thing, right? So like for me, I knew when we entered the industry that like there was likely going to be something to working with partners, right? I didn't know how that was going to look. I didn't know, anything really about how that was actually going to work, but I knew that it was likely going to be on the cards in the future. So I made an effort to reach out, especially after we found like our first partnership. I made an effort to reach out to industry like influencers, to consultants, to stuff like to folks like that. And then, I'm glad the way you phrased that question, Mash, because like typically like what I've said in the past is like, oh, like, if you're doing like a summit, then like you've got to solve the cold start problem, but I didn't have to go through that. But I'm thinking about how I actually did go through that in the beginning. And so the biggest thing that I did, and I think it's something that I've realized over time, is just as human beings, essentially you're compensated, you're paid for your skill sets, and everyone has different skill sets, right? And things that are easy to you may be very difficult to other people, and vice versa. And so whenever you can find something like that where something is very easy for you but means a ton to other people, now you have the option to either charge money, or what you can do is you can essentially collect social capital by like offering those things for free. And what's interesting is that just by offering, you collect some of the social capital, even if they don't say yes, right? That me just saying, hey, Mash, like, can I make an intro for you to this person? Even if you go no, the fact that I asked means you're going to think just a little bit like more highly of me, in your head, right? And so, what I did was I reached out to the consultants, and I essentially just said, hey, like, I'm Mark. We're working on this software company. I would love to talk to you about it. But hey, like, while I have your attention, if you guys have any technical issues, feel free to drop me a message, because like I have like someone that I go to for WordPress stuff and for all these things. We may not be able to solve it, but I'm definitely going to be able to find you the person who can solve it. And we've actually, like, in the beginning, I would pay $50 or $100 to consult, or not to consultants, but to freelancers to come in and to fix industry consultants' issues, but then not tell them that I paid, or like not pass on the cost, right? Of just like, oh, like, it's fine. It just took an hour of my guy's time. Like, don't worry about it. It's on me. And they don't know that that person wasn't even on my team, that I literally just hired someone off of Upwork to solve their problem. And so I generated a ton of goodwill over time. So then when I wanted to do the Maid Summit, when we did the very first Maid Summit, I sent out 35 invitations on Sunday night, and I had 21 confirmations when I woke up on Monday morning. That was because of time zones, right? But I got a ton of people that were in right from the beginning. And then the mastermind one is a little bit of a different story. That one I did deal with the cold start problem, and that it took a long time. It took a lot of time, and probably took a year or two to really get the mastermind to get going. To answer Alex's question that he had asked earlier. So with the remaining 7K in monthly revenue, how did you allocate that? How much into marketing, into development, into question mark, question mark, question mark? Yeah, good question. So I don't remember exactly, but I mean, we didn't pay for any development help until we were 3 or 4 years into the 3 years into the business. About a year and a half before that redesign fiasco was when we hired development help. So before that, there wasn't really anything there. So I think at about $8,000 a month, maybe we were spending $1,000 a month, maybe on like generating just consistent traffic to the website. $1,000 was being paid to me each month. We probably had some server costs and stuff like that. But honestly, like my co-founder, and I'm very, very thankful for it in hindsight, my co-founder was just very, very fiscally like conservative. And I knew he was much more responsible with the money than me. So I just let him like make the decision there. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that we were probably, when we were making 8K a month, we might have been putting 3 or 4K a month, like in the bank, right? That we could have been paying ourselves that, but we decided to put it in the bank. And then, you know, the redesign that we did probably cost us $100,000, even though like my CTO was working on it the entire time with all the help that he needed. It took probably a year and a half and probably cost us that much. So yeah, it's essentially we were just saving a lot of money. Let's see. Other questions that had come in were about the canned spam.
Yeah, we had a question from Lobao, reiterated by Johan, about canned spam and just like how to do that correctly with cold email.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of a tough one. Like, I don't want to give any sort of answer that's going to get anyone into like legal trouble, you know, like, you know, consult with an actual professional and all that, you know, fine print or whatever. To me, this is just more of like of a common sense thing. Like, honestly, I think that if you're having to ask yourself, like, is this spam or is it like an appropriate cold email? Then like either you're clearly on the spamming side or you're a dev that hates sales and your email is completely okay. Right. So like the best thing to do is probably to just like ask on Twitter. But the main thing with the canned spam is that you can't have like misleading subject lines. You can't have anything that's going to be misleading or deceiving people or anything like that. They have to have an option to opt out. And I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I think as long as you're emailing somebody that can actually like make use of your service, you're respectful if like they say no or to fuck off or whatever, you're not likely to get in trouble, at least in the United States. I know the other question that had come in was about Germany. In Germany, I would just not cold email. Unfortunately, that sucks. You live in Europe. It's not great for marketing. It doesn't seem to be as great like for business. Like I love Europe. I'm moving to Europe like next year, but I would just not touch cold email if I was in Germany, right? Like you can look it up. I don't know. That's definitely one of talk to your lawyer, but I don't know. For some reason, like German law scares me. I'm like, don't want to get on the wrong side of it. In the US, I'm just like, I'll just pay a fine. Like, you know, that's essentially what it was. You know, in the US, you get a slap on the wrist, right? Like, it's just like, okay, sorry, I'll cease and desist.
Does you move into Europe mean emails out of your toolbox for marketing?
Well, so we actually don't use cold email anymore. That at some point we got to the point where actually the number of leads, it just became too much to manage between having our opted in list that like we can send mass emails to versus like the cold email ones. Oh, so actually one other thing, because the question, I forget how it was phrased, but the question mentioned mass marketing outreach. So one thing is make sure you're sending emails like one-to-one. Is don't use MailChimp to do like an email blast. It's okay to use a tool like quickmail.io or what is it, Lemlist or one of those, right? Where they're sending one-to-one like cold emails, but like absolutely do not, like, this is one thing that has never been cool, whether it's been legal or not, but do not take like a list that you have and then like upload it to like Active Campaign or to MailChimp or to like ConvertKit or one of those. Like those people have not opted into your list. Like you need to use a very specific cold emailing software because all of those softwares are going to legally cover you, right? Like they won't let you email people that you're not supposed to be emailing because it's their ass on the line, right? So, you know, that's a good way to make sure that you're not breaking any laws, is like don't do it through Gmail just because you might do something inadvertently. Other questions that are coming in from
Got some good ones from Brian.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Why just maid services? So that's a really simple one. Are like the problems that we are solving are completely different than other industries. Scheduling is not scheduling. The scheduling that is needed for carpet cleaning is completely different than the needs for home cleaning. And one thing is that we're very specific to home cleaners. not commercial cleaners, not Airbnb cleaners. Airbnb cleaners, completely different set of needs. You would think that it's the exact same because it's the exact same service, but the scheduling needs are completely different. The billing needs are completely different, right? There's an entire other party between the like guest and all this stuff. So that's essentially why. The other actually like big answer there is that like even now, the instant that we go into carpet cleaning, the instant that we go into power washing, the instant that we go into auto detailing, we lose every marketing advantage that we have. Right? That right now I'm so niche, right? Nobody wants to, well, not nobody, right? But like you can join Facebook groups with like 50,000 small business owners. And like, sure, that's helpful, but you're probably not going to like have all that many meaningful conversations about your specific business, right? And now you compare that to a Facebook group that's just for maid service owners, just like you. And all of a sudden, like, there's a much more powerful draw to that. Now, a lot of people will obviously choose to be in both because they like serve like both sides. But, like imagine if I was, trying to run like, I don't know, I mean, I guess there is like the home services summit, right? Like, that does exist, but I just decided that I don't want to compete in that arena, right? That right now, all of my decisions are so much easier because I serve one industry, right? Like I have one target customer in mind. I don't have to take into account anything else. And then one thing, if you guys follow me on Twitter, is you'll notice that like everything in my life is optimized for freedom, convenience, and simplicity, right? So like I don't want to like add complexity to the decisions that I have to make at zenmaid. That doesn't sound like fun to me, right? Now, granted, I'm kind of in like that zone where like I'm challenged just enough, so it's not like I'm like bored. But like for me, it's like optimizing more time, at spots like this, right? Like this is my view while we're having like this chat. Like everything in my life is pretty much about that. And by the way, I don't know if you guys can read that sign right there, but right now I'm building zenmaid from Zen Beach, which always makes me laugh.
How much did it cost to get the naming rights for that beach, Amar?
Oh, good question. Good question. But like, I wouldn't change it though. Like, it's so perfectly named. So I don't know. Let's see. Other questions from Brian here. Cold emails for cold email campaign. Yeah, good question. How did you find maid service owner emails for the cold email campaign? How did you increase the response rate? So two good questions there. First one's simple. We just use Yelp. We just found, just any directory. We could have used Google, but I essentially just had a VA and just said like, here's a list of like the 100 biggest cities in the United States. Just, go in and like search these locations on Yelp. And then I'm sure at some point I said, go search these locations on Google and just add maid service and then see what are like the things that pop up. And I just said, this is what I need, right? Essentially, I need the email and the phone number. Oh, sorry, forgot something that I hope doesn't depress most of you. I also did cold calling when I was starting the business, that I would cold email everyone. And then everyone that I cold emailed, I would also call like, at some morning when I had time, or on Saturdays, I would like take Adderall and just call all day. Like I would pretty much do that as well. So
what's a cold call from you sound like? Like ring, 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 ring. Oh, hi, who is this?
Great. Good question. It would probably be like, hey, it's Amar. Like, is the owner available, right? Or if I know the owner's name, is this person available? And usually you get a, may I know who's calling, or are they expecting your call, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then it's usually, oh yeah, it's Amar. It's Amar from zenmaid. I was checking to see if they received my email earlier. Right. Or like they should have gotten an email from me like earlier. Right. You can even say they're expecting a call from me, as long as you said in your email, I'm going to call you. Right. Like they're all truthful things to say. Right. Like, they're a tiny bit misleading. But,
what's your hit rate getting them on the phone from the gatekeeper?
Pretty high, pretty high, but that's mainly because with maid services, they're not that like, they usually want to talk to everyone, and it's a service-based business, right? So they have no idea if they're talking to a potential client or not. So it's actually decently like high. Getting folks to call back is another thing. Okay, what did you do, or how did you increase the response rate? Okay, so great question here, Brian, of like, how do you increase the response rate? So there's kind of two answers for that, right? So one thing to remember is that you're not actually trying to like optimize the response rate, right? It's great to always improve your response rate, but remember that like ultimately you're optimizing for like getting more people on the phone or getting more people to actually buy. It's a different kind of thing. So what I found had the best response rate was a simple question, which was, do you do both residential and commercial cleaning? Just that. No name, no nothing, like not my name, not their name, nothing. Just, do you do both residential and commercial cleaning? Almost everyone would respond to that message. And then we would take like the conversation from there. I think we kind of varied it up because we didn't honestly have like the best tracking on stuff at the time, right? This was back in 2013. So I was using Gmail for most of for most of this stuff. But that was essentially how like we went about kind of like increasing like the response rate, but like we would occasionally go more direct. And like the more direct one was, are you happy with like your current calendar or scheduling? And so the difference between those two, the first one, really high response rate, it starts the conversation, right? Which means they're more likely to respond to future emails, but oftentimes they'll be turned off as soon as they realize that you're not actually a customer and you won't get response to whatever. That's okay. Lots of people don't respond anyways. The second email, much lower response rate, but the people that respond are already pre-qualified because they tend to be responding because they hate their current software, right? And so that's where, it's kind of like a mixed bag, and I would suggest you guys test those out yourselves and see what your specific industry or what your niche responds to, right? Like what worked for me is not necessarily going to like work for you guys, right? Like if you're more enterprise than us, those gatekeepers are going to be a real headache. For us, there rarely was a gatekeeper because you've got to be a decent sized maid service to even have an office manager to act as a gatekeeper. Let's see. Where can I find a Amar like non-technical co-founder for my indie SaaS? I would say indie hackers or Twitter probably. And with that, I would think they would probably be about building up your personal brand a little bit as like a technical founder, and then like putting it out into the world of like, hey guys, like I've got something, that like, I think has potential here. I'm looking for like, a non-technical co-founder or whatever, but that's when I would definitely try to attract people. For me, I got lucky, right? Like, my co-founder, he was a friend from back in the day. He actually approached me about it because he'd seen how hard I was working to improve like my sales and like, all this other stuff. And he actually approached me with it. So I got very lucky, but I think that's why he kind of moved on to crypto and like is doing like all that stuff now. Whereas I was like, no, like this is my chance. Like it's not every day that like a developer, like, asks you like, hey, can I build you this product for you to just like go and sell and like own 50% of? And I was like, okay, yes, like I am totally in on that. Right. Like I am never leaving this. So yeah.
So you've hit some goals now. Is zenmaid still like a full-time thing for you? Is it your focus right now? And if it is, what are your goals with it? Where are you trying to go?
It is. It's my primary focus, but it's no longer full-time. But that's by design, right? So to me, I now work as many hours as I'd like to in the day. So today is a pretty standard morning for me. That it's about 7:40 in the morning right now, and I woke up somewhere between like 5 and 6, got up, got a little bit of work done, and then jumped on this call. And that's my typical morning. Is I'm usually talking to some folks that are in the US or team members or whatever, and I'll work from maybe 5 or 6 in the morning until about 9 in the morning, and then I'm usually off most of the rest of the day until about 4 p.m. And then after that, it's after that, like 2 or 3 nights a week, I have quite a bit of work into the evening, and the other 3 nights I'm completely free. So it's like one thing at 4, and then I'm done for the day. So essentially, my goals with zenmaid is well, yeah. So essentially, everyone chooses to play like a specific game in like their career, right? And like in life as well, right? And so lots of people are playing the game of make as much money as possible, right? Like most billionaires that you see, they don't need the money anymore. They don't need to be doing that anymore. Like the guys you see that are trying to race to get to 100 billion and stuff like that, like at that point, it's like that's the game that they've chosen to play. That might make some people miserable. For them, they absolutely love it. For me, the game that I've personally chosen to play is I want to see how big I can build zenmaid while keeping this quality of life. So I don't look at people that are making $10 million a year. I'm not jealous of them unless I actually think that their lifestyle is also like better than mine. right? Like to me, my lifestyle is way better than a lot of people that I know that are making a ton of money, right? And I would not trade places with them for an instant. But there are some people that I see that I'm like, shit, you make like 100 times more money than me, and you're having fun. Like I want to get to that level just to see if I can, right? Like I don't need to, right? Like I don't have anything else to like spend the money on. But that's essentially the game that I've chosen to play. So it's still it's essentially it's my full-time focus, but it's not my full-time job.
Mash, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm very curious, Amar. So we know that you speak to a lot of founders, indie slash maybe a few years ahead. They're making a lot of money. What my question is, what are two of the biggest challenges that early stage indie hackers find with marketing? And how do you propose usually that they come across or overcome it? I know it's very case dependent, depends on the startup and the industry.
Yeah.
But if there was two main challenges that a lot of early stage technical founders find when it comes to growth, what are they and how do you generally recommend that they overcome that?
I mean, usually it just comes down to a sales problem, and by a sales problem, I mean that usually the biggest struggle is just asking for money, right? And essentially limiting beliefs, right? Like almost every founder that I talk to, and I mean, hell, like I have limiting beliefs. Everyone has limiting beliefs, right? But every like early stage founder that I talk to, oftentimes has limiting beliefs around like asking for money. Right. The number of indie hackers that I've seen that now make money because at some point one of their clients was like, you can't keep offering this from free. Like, here, take my money, to me is way too high. Right. Like, if that's the case, they could have built a successful business probably a year or two before that if they'd just gone out and actually sold. And so I think like honestly, like I think it's actually like the biggest thing that I would probably say is a lot of people both underestimate themselves and they underestimate like what they've created despite all the evidence to the contrary, right? The number of folks that I see that are like, oh yeah, I've got all these like happy users, like I couldn't charge any money. And you're just like, okay, so like you validated that you're creating enough value for people to keep coming back to you, and yet somehow there's a mismatch because you don't think that there's any value that you could like charge there. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think that for a lot of people, once they have like that breakthrough and it sort of clicks in their head and they realize it's okay to ask for money, it's okay to charge money. That's why you see a lot of people with that very, very flat line for like 2 years. And then all of a sudden it's like they jump to 5K or to like 8K or to 10K as like a solo dev. So
that's where they started doing sales and marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And usually if they've already gotten the product and everything else to that point, that sales just takes off as soon as they're willing to just like ask for the money. Right. Which is quite funny. So yeah, I would say that's probably like the biggest roadblock. The other thing that I would say is that another like big like roadblock or obstacle. It's way too many new founders are trying to market as if they're a big business, right? They're like, okay, well, I'm like, here's my content strategy, and you're like, okay, but if this is your content strategy and you don't have any customers yet, you're looking at waiting 6 to 9 months before any of this like works, and you don't know if it's going to work. Right? Like you have to find something that works faster, right? And that works now. And then you can focus on the long-term stuff, right? Like if somebody tried to come in and to beat zenmaid by copying our distribution models, they would have zero chance. For someone to come in and to beat zenmaid right now, they've got to come in and use Snapchat or TikTok or some other like social media platform that we're not active on yet to get that initial, spearhead and to get those initial 50 champions, 100 champions or whatever, to then expand like from there. But if they try to come in and compete with zenmaid on SEO, it's like, I take all the I take all the videos from the Maid Summit, give them to like, quality writers, and then have them turned into like really, really high quality articles. So like, the zenmaid blog has 500 articles and counting of like actually amazing quality information. Like, like there's no way anyone's going to come in and beat us on that. Right. Like, if they do, I'm really not good at my job.
He's asking, have you considered hiring a CEO to replace yourself? Just becoming an advisor of the company and going all in on the lifestyle.
Yeah, I've thought about that, but honestly, I'm still very, very fulfilled in the work that I do daily. Like doing that sounds boring to me. But it is on the cards, and I do think that in the long run, like one of the people that I really look up to that I'm sure a lot of folks on this call know is Andrew Wilkinson, right? Who has Tiny Capital or Tiny Co or whatever, and so the way that I've just looked at it is with zenmaid. I'd say there's a good chance that in the future I'm going to have like a portfolio of SaaS companies, buy a couple others. I've already tried to buy, or I have actually bought two others, but neither of them like worked out. Good learning experiences, but neither of them like worked out. And so yeah, like it's crossed my mind. Like I think I'm much more likely to hire a CEO to replace me than I am to sell the company. But I can't imagine really doing that if I didn't already have kind of the next project like in place, or if I didn't essentially have something like, you know, I'm going to go try to get like my jujitsu black belt in the next 6 months. So like I'm going to, you know, remove myself and go do that, and then after 6 months I'll revisit kind of the business stuff. That's kind of where my head's at now.
Right on. Well, Amar, thank you so much for your time here. Thanks for hopping on this call. And if you're interested in getting a lot more of Amar, definitely go through MASH Sparrow Startup, see if you can't get in on the one-on-one mentoring.
Follow me on Twitter. Check out my website, theamericandream.com. It's Amar as an AMAR, not the American Dream.
Thank you guys, everybody who's watching.